right, as I was saying, we are going to head over to our normal workspace and we create a folder for today's session. So let us head over to our desktop. I am very sure most of us already know this, right? We are all used to this because this is what we always do every day. So we are going to head over to our desktop and then we have to go into our full stack workspace. Then inside we have these folders so far for the past sessions, and we're now going to create in another one. And this new folder is going to be related to today's session. So we are going to call it HTML structure. So HTML structure and styling basics, like this. So it's HTML structure and styling basics, because within the HTML structure, this is where we see the blog and inline elements, and then we're also going to look at some styling basics. Actually, more of our focus is going to be on styling. So please, everyone create this folder, and you need to go into it or change your directory to it. And you remember you can always use the tab key for auto-completion. You press enter, and now make sure you observe that you will make sure you observe that you will have the same name listed here. So I'm giving you 30 seconds to do that. Once you're done, please type in the chat, done. All right, so if you're now done opening your folder within your VS Code, you can still verify that you have opened the right folder by looking up here if it is the same exact name. So now, as I said, our topic of today, we're going to be looking at HTML block and inline elements. So let us start with a lesson of, let us start with inline elements like this. Inline elements.html. So, and let us create all these files at the same time. Also block elements.html. So please make sure you create the two files at the same time. And now we're going to explain. You can also create a readme.html. And here we're going to have readme.md, not HTML. Create it as an MD file, markdown file. So we're going to have it as HTML structure and styling basics. So as we start, we are going to begin with block elements. And for the definition of block elements, so block elements, mainly, these are elements that always start on a new line. So as we've been seeing all of this in our past sessions, block elements, these are elements that usually start on a new line. So that would be a simple definition for that. Block elements are HTML elements that always start on a new line. We shall see more characters of block elements. We shall see how they usually occupy the whole width, because the only reason for them to go on the next line, that is because they are already occupying the whole width. So now, if we come into our HTML, so I'll pause a little bit so that you can process this very well. So mainly block elements are elements that always start on a new line. You've seen it when we always like create H1, they will always start on new lines. You remember when we were learning headings, when we were learning heading 1 up to heading 6, they started on the same line without introducing in a BR or a break. So those are block elements. So we shall actually repeat the same thing and see how it works. So again, you do not need to type all of this in the README. You should only type things that we're going to be writing in our HTML files, because the README, after all, I'll push all of this on GitHub, and you can always take a look at it, and you can always go back to the recordings and look into it. So, in other words, by looking at this, or the behaviors of elements, we need to first understand that all elements by default, they display in a certain way. Or in other words, all elements have their own default behavior display. So to change the behavior displays, you can always use styles. But before we actually even go into styles, we need to understand how most of the elements do behave by default. So that is why we have block elements and as well as inline elements. We've just seen that block elements, these are elements that we always start on a new line as we defined it here. So now let us look at it by codes. So if we just have a simple structure of HTML, and here we can just say block level elements like this, elements. And now in our body, we can introduce in some headings. This is heading 1, heading 1. And then we can have another heading 2. This is heading 2. And then an H3. This is heading 3. So you'll see how this is going to display if we now run it in our browser by hitting go live. So you can see how this is displaying. Every element is starting on a new line. And this is what we call block level elements. So headings are block level elements. And there should, you can ask a question that, are we supposed to cram all elements that are block? You're not actually going to cram all elements, and you might not even be, it might not even be possible for you to cram all of them. But again, you need to just understand how they're usually displayed. So any element that you will see in a browser displayed on a new line, it means that's a block level element. And we are going to give some of the popular examples of block level elements. And those ones you're actually supposed to understand that they're block by default. But again, you don't need to cram every element that is block level. So when we go back to our README and provide examples, I'll just provide an example. Remember, 2 stars in Markdown represent boldness. So we're trying to bold this word example. So, and this is a bullet. When you just type a hyphen and space, it's a bullet. So some of the examples of block level elements include div. We haven't included that the div, we shall explain. The P, we have explained this one. The headings, I'll just write H1 to H6. And sections, all these elements that display in sort of a block way, they are all block level elements. There is also article. There is also all semantic, is it written like this? Semantic elements, right? So, and these include nav, footer, header, etc., and so on. So, and we shall also look at this. So mainly all these elements and so many others actually, not only this, and also the UL, the OL, the list, all of these are block level elements. Also the form, it's also a block level element. So these are the most popular ones. So now we shall pass through each elements that we did not look at. So let us first look at the div element. So div elements are usually used if you want to have a section or a unique section. Let's say if you want to have a section on your website that is related to the header, you can introduce in a div. Or if you have some elements that are having the same behavior or that belong to the same functionality, they are usually grouped in a div. In other words, a div is there for you to group your elements or to arrange your elements. That is the main purpose of having a div. So let's say I can have a div that is comprised of a heading one, which is about us, and we can have some paragraphs like lorem some related to about us. That one should be put in a div because this div should probably be a div of maybe that is even going to have an idea of about us. So all of this is actually related to about us. That is why we need to group it into a div. A div is usually referred to as a box. So it's a box where you can have in similar or things that are of the same nature or things that belong to the same group. So just understand it as a way of grouping your things. The same as we saw form. Even though form is a very unique element that is only used on forms, things where you have in inputs and some other buttons related to the inputs. So that is a div. And now for the P, we already learned this. And for the H1 up to H6, we already learned this. And a section. A section also should behave as a div. It has the same nature, but again, you might want to group your web page parts into sections. Let's say you have a call to action section, you have an about section, you have a contact section, and that is mostly used on pages whereby, on web pages whereby you have a single page application. An example of that, let me delete this. An example, this is usually done, and you might end up actually using this within your portfolio. Let me say I should have a section for, let me say this is an H1 of maybe a hero section. Hero section. A hero section is a section that everyone lands on whenever they visit a page. And this one should be very beautiful, should be very well thought of, because this is what is going to attract the people who are going to be viewing your brand. And this is what is going to make them continue reading, continue scrolling. So this is the section, you understand? You might also have another section of maybe skills. This is a section which is going to display your skills. And you might also have another section which is related. Let us actually, before we go to skills, let us go to about me. And then the third one should be maybe skills. And the fourth one should be projects or your portfolio, something like that. And the last one can be contact me, which is actually going to include a contact form. So you can see, I'm now putting them in sections, but let me put them in H1s for it to be very well visible. You can see now we have around 5 sections, but all these sections have different importance. So this is for the hero section, which is the first one you land on. And this is for the about me, and the other one, skills, projects, and contact me. Then on top of the sections, you can have other elements. And these elements might include the nav section, or some other people like to use header. So this header is different from the head here. So this is just a normal element, whereas this is an important element whereby our metadata and title and links go. But this one is just an element like any other elements in the body. So you might have your header here. This is where your links are. This is where links are put. Let me comment this. And now, let me give you an example. So this header is now a semantic element. This is actually, whenever everybody looks at that, they will understand that that is a header or something that should appear on top. And that is a semantic element. So semantic elements, these are elements that are actually going to help most of the people who are going to be viewing your codes to understand that this tag or this element belongs to a certain group. And they usually help people to understand more about what is going to be written inside. If you look at this, you already know that this is going to be on top of your website, your web page. It is going to appear here on top. It's a header, right? So they usually help to define a structure and meaning of the web content and can also improve accessibility. When we talk of accessibility, we are talking of search engine optimizations, right? So your website should always be structured in a well and best practice way so that we can make sure that search engine optimizations understand how your web structure looks like. You can always even use a div here. It should work. But again, as I said, you need to do best practices. If it is a header, you need to use header instead of divs. Then the divs can appear inside sections. Divs can appear inside the section because a section is bigger than a div. Understand a div as a small box or a small part of your structure, right? So let me remove it for now. All right, so now after this header, inside the header, we can have some UL, and we can also have in lists like maybe home, right? And we can also have in what else? We can have in about me. Let us try to put in links related to what we are having in our section skills. And we can also as well have in projects and then contact me. Contact me. So if we come to our web, it won't look great actually because we do not have styles. That is why styles are very important. But once you put in styles, you will see that it will look differently. So now, if you look at all these elements, what are you noticing? Are they inline or block elements? We haven't put any styles in our HTML, but you can see they are all appearing on the next line, which means these are block elements. These are block elements. Any element that will appear on the next line, it's a block element. And usually these elements appear to be occupying the whole width. The whole width. If like we come to our hero section, let us try to put some styles. These styles are just for demonstration to show you that every block element usually occupies the whole width of your whole screen. If you put the background color of red, you will see that it has occupied the whole width, even though the hero section ends up to here. But you can see it has occupied the whole width. So this is how block elements behave. This was just for demonstration to show you that that is why the next element that comes up will go on the next line because the first one has already occupied the whole width, which is going to be different from when we study inline elements. You will observe that. So is it, before we actually leave this one, because we are going to come up back to this when we are styling. So before we leave this page, let us also introduce another semantic element called footer. Whenever you write a footer element, everyone will understand. Let me put in a small tag, footer. Everyone will understand that this element will appear below. But again, let me remind you this. You writing the word footer doesn't mean that your element should appear down. If you come and bring your footer up here, above the header, like this, it will appear here, up here. So first understand this. You writing header, you writing footer, it doesn't mean that your things are going to appear top or bottom. It is going to be up to you. These are just there for helping the browsers to understand that this is exactly a footer, or even helping other fellow developers that the things that are inside belong to the footer. But it doesn't mean it is going to help you position your footer down or what. It is up to you to style it. So just understand semantic elements as just elements or tags that convey meaning of the content inside. That is it. We will all know that this is the content for the footer. We all know a footer. for a website. It's the below part. And we all know what a header is. This is just going, a header is. This is just going to communicate that this is the top part. And we all know section. Section is going to convey that this is a section of your whole web page, right? So these are what we call semantic elements. Now, and all those semantic elements are all actually block elements. And all the elements we just saw here, all of them, the ordered list, the header, the section, the headings, and the P and the small elements are all block elements. I hope you have understood what block elements are. Any questions before we continue to inline elements? Let me check the chat. I don't see any question in the chat, so everything is clear. Do you have a question? All right. I think there are no questions. Now, let me move to the inline elements. Before we go to the inline elements, let's first do some explanation here. Inline elements. So these are elements that do not start on a new line. It's the opposite of the other, on a new line. Or they just take up a width equivalent to their length, in other words, length. Okay, so, and examples of these include anchor tag. This one you already saw. Most of these elements, we saw them actually when we were working on some of the elements. The bold element, the button element, the emphasize element. We saw most of these ones. Input element, the label element. It is not also block. And even the text area. The text area is the same as the input. It is just that it is bigger compared to the input. And also the superscript and sub, of course. We saw most of these elements, right? So now, and you can look at more elements when you are actually coding. And by the way, as I told you, you don't need to cram that these elements are block or inline. You will actually see it yourself. When you use it, then you'll see it. But at the end of the day, you'll actually you'll be getting some in your heads that these are already block elements, these are inline. So, but you don't need to cram them. They will just get into your head just like that. As more as you keep working as more as you keep using them actually. So now let us try to use these elements and we see. Let me delete this. Inline elements. So now if we come to our body and try to put in an anchor tag, and let us just put in anything. You don't have to put in anything. We just want to see. This is the link. Let me stop this and then go live again. You can just see we don't have another element to compare it with, but if we just try and put there a style of, let's say, background color, and you say red, what did you notice? It's the same thing we did here. It's the same thing we did here, right? It's the same thing, but you can see here it occupied the whole width, but you can see here it only occupied the width equivalent to its length. Can you see that? So these are what we call inline elements, which means in case we put there another element, it is going to appear next to it. Let us put there another element. Let us put there like a span. Span is the commonly used inline element. I forgot to mention this. This one, you will always use it. Whenever you want to append something next to a block element, you will always use span. So now, Coming back to my inline, if I didn't put anything here, text. So can you see that it was put right next to the other element? It didn't go down because it has some space to fit in. And this one also span is an inline element. It will continue to the same line. If we also put there a style, let's copy this. You will actually see that it also didn't occupy the whole width. So these are called inline elements. And these inline elements are mostly used when we want to see an element or our content appear next to another content from another element. That element might be block or might also be inline. It doesn't matter. So, and span is one of the useful elements that are mostly used. You will see that whenever we want to have an inline element, we are mostly going to use span. I hope this is clear. So for inline elements, there isn't too much to look into, but you need to understand that first of all, it doesn't start on a new line, and second, it only has a length equivalent to its length, as you can see, which is different from the block elements, as you can see. Putting there the backgrounds is just for demonstration for you guys to notice that the two are different. Now, after looking at block elements and inline elements, now let us go deep into how we can use them with each other through the styling, which is now going to bring us to our topic of styling, which is very interesting. So before we had not studied any styling, and right now we need to go through the styling and understand how we can apply CSS into our web pages. But first, you need to make sure that you understand block and inline elements. You don't need to cram examples of each, but you just need to understand how they behave, right? Let me repeat once again. Block elements are elements that take up mostly full width available, and they should start on a new line. Some of the characteristics you will notice, they usually occupy the entire width of the container, of the parent container. Right now, the parent container here in our element is the body. This is the parent. I mean, is the section here. This is the parent. And another thing is that you always see them starting on a new line, which is different from the inline ones. So I come back to the inline. Inline elements occupy only the width is equivalent to their length, and they are not going to start on a new line. Some of the characteristics, you can see that they will follow each other on the same line, and they do not go on the next line until you maybe put there a break. If I come here and put a break here, that is why you could see we were putting there breaks. This break is going to force it to come down, but its default behavior, it won't show that it is going to come down. It will go next to the other element. And the differences, I just mentioned all of them. And how you can use them, it is up to you and whatever you intend to have. But again, make sure that you use them accordingly. As we said, you cannot have a div and have inside the div a section. Yes, it is going to work for sure. But again, it doesn't mean that you're doing it the right way. If you come and do div like this, and you have your section put inside, this is going to work perfectly. But this is wrong, practically wrong. And those are some of the setbacks of HTML. It will never show you these warnings. For frameworks like React, you know React is already using HTML behind the scene. They'll always give you those warnings, telling you that you can't have a parent inside a child. But for pure HTML, they won't give you those warnings. So please be careful and understand that a section is bigger than a div. As you'll be coding, you will be understanding all of this. And you can actually also use your English. You can't have a div inside a section. A section is bigger than a div. Consider a div as a small box or a small part of your structure. So I think I took too much time explaining block and inline elements. Now let us go to our styling. So everyone, please make sure you create a folder called CSS. The reason why I usually create folders, it's for you to understand how you can always track the path of your files. Usually you can even have styles.css right here in the root directory. But I usually create folders so that you can know that you can always nest things in folders and you can always find them by tracking their absolute path. So I'm going to have an index.css, and I usually like to name things differently, because if you keep on naming styles.css, some of you are going to cram that that should be the way. You can name anything you want, as long as you just remember what you named the file. So for me, I will just name it with like index.css. And then I will have another, outside this, I'll have another. By the way, some of you will end up creating files in folders if you when you don't even want it to be so. Whenever you're in a folder, if you try to hit this and this folder is highlighted, the file is going to be created in that folder. To avoid that, you should always click outside the files like this. Can you see that? I'm clicking outside. You can see the blue border. So it means that I'm in the root directory. So I can create a file and it will be created in the root directory. If I create it like this, let me call it brand.html. We are going to be using some CSS by trying to create a brand, right? Or a portfolio. So now you can see it is in the root directory. Let me have in some structure of HTML, and I'll just go ahead and remove this metadata, and I'll just say my brand or my portfolio. 44. Yeah, I guess it's written like that. So now inside my body, I'm going to copy this. I'm actually going to copy all of this. And you can always, you don't have to select like this and move down. You can always use these side drop downs to actually grab all the codes within your body. Like if I come and click here, it means I'll grab everything that is in the body. If I uncollapse it and come and do this, I'll grab everything that is in the header like this. So I would want to just grab everything that is in the body. I'll just do that and then copy. And then I'll come and replace my body here. You can see the other codes I had are already now here. Let me try to zoom out a little bit. I guess you can still see my codes. So now I'm going to use the same things. And now let me open it in my browser like this. You can see this is how it looks. I'll just remove this styling. I'll just remove this. All right, you can now see that I at least have some section. I have the header, I have some hero section, about me, skills, and the footer. So I'm going to make sure I use my CSS to have this arranged very well, right? So inside here, let us also put in some information. Let us put in lorem. We don't have time to write content, right? Let us just put in some content that we just want. I'll just use lorem. You can always type lorem and you'll see some citations show up. P and then lorem. Yeah, and the footer, we shall just leave it like that. So we have some sections with certain only in the skills. In the skills, we don't have anything. Lorem. So you can see now we have in each section some words, but all of this looks nasty because we do not have any styles to it. So now we are going to attach a style sheet to it so that we can start styling our things. So now, let us go to our head. So within our head, this is where we can link our styles. But again, you don't need to use that type of styling only. You can use other styles of styling. As we said last time, let me go to this. I'll just put in another head, basic. CSS. So there are 3 types of styling. I think I mentioned this. Let me have some people who can tell me the first type of styling. Because last time we talked about it. Anybody? So last time we said we can do inline styling. This is the first way you can style your web page. We also said we can have an internal styling
and external.
and external styling. Thanks. External styling. And we said this is the recommended one. I'll just put there recommended. So this is the recommended way of styling because every styling here has an advantage and a disadvantage. But the only type of styling that has many advantages is this one, because you can get to use some of the styles in other web pages. But for internal, it means it's internal to that file. And for inline, it means it's for that specific line you're styling. You can't use those styles anywhere else. I think this is self-explanatory. But for external, you can use that external file anywhere else by just linking it, right? All right, so now, let us now connect our styles to this. So we usually connect styles by using a link tag within the head tag, not the header. So when you just start typing link, you'll get some suggestions and you can click on the link with certain pseudo keyword CSS. These are called pseudo. The keyword is written like this. I don't know if that is how we read it. I usually read it like this, pseudo. Everybody has a different way of pronouncing it. So you will just come to this one with CSS. And now the relationship, REL means relationship. This link, or we are linking this file whereby the relationship is style sheet. So by default, it gives you style.css. That is why I usually like to name it differently, because at the end of the day, you might cram that it is always named as style.css. So mine, I actually named it as index.css, and I inserted it, or I nested it in a folder called CSS. So we'll need to remove this, and this is how we should grab the path of CSS, by just making sure that we know our current directory. A dot and a forward slash is current. So this is where this file is. It is the current directory. And we want to enter, or we want to go into CSS. It means that we'll have to just write CSS, because once we leave our current, we go to CSS. And you can even see suggestions. If you click on CSS, you also see the file inside the CSS. You can press it. So I'm giving you, everyone, just 1 minute to make sure that you have linked your CSS to your HTML. And you only know that you have linked it if you write in some styles here. Just write in a body style, whereby you put in a background color of, let us put in a background color of, let us look for a color Asia, like this. You can see how it looks. It's light blue. So make sure that you do this. If you have done it perfectly, it means you'll be able to visualize a light blue inside here, this color called Asia, right? So link your brand. Let me clean up this. And I can have my brand and also my index.css separate like this. So now make sure you link it and make sure that you can see this. All right. 1 minute, and I'll just stop recording to make sure that we do not put in this. I'll pause it. All right, so as now we have finished linking our CSS to our HTML, now we are going to start styling using our external styling format. So now, as we just said in our README file, that this is the syntax of our CSS, whereby we have a selector and CSS property, and then a value. It's the same way we're going to do everywhere we're going to be writing our styles. And we are going to be using different selectors as I'll be explaining them. Right now, we have just used the tag selector, and this is a tag. But later on, we shall see how we can even use classes. We shall be mixing for the purpose of just knowing how things can be used. But usually, you choose to either use 2 or 3 selectors. Like you can use the tag selector, the ID selector, and the class selector. Or sometimes you choose between the ID and class, you use class and use also the group selector, as well as the descendant selector is sometimes used. We shall see that. So now, let us move on with our styling of the page. We shall start with the header. So as you can see it on our HTML, this is where our header is, right? Now, our header, we usually know that headings are usually on the same line like this, you see? And we can always link them. Therefore, we are not going to use things that can't be linked, which can't be inline. We are going to use inline. In other words, we are going to use inline. So we're going to have our UL, and our UL is going to contain some lists. And these lists, we can either choose to use anchor tags inside, or we can also use other things like buttons. But for the best practices, we need to use anchor tags because we already know that we are going to have, we already. All right, so now, as I was saying, we should have our links in the header inline, because we want them to act as a normal header and also clickable links. So now, who can tell me what styles we can use? How should we start? Remember, we want to style this header. All right, so first of all, we'll make sure that these are not just lists, but rather lists with links. So now we'll have to make sure that we put in some, before the name, we put in an anchor tag, and then we have in our name like this. So this is actually going to help us to navigate to sections or pages, because lists cannot help us navigate. Only anchor tags can do that. So now we have in another one, and we can put in here, and we can do the same thing everywhere. Anchor tag, and then names, projects. As I'm doing this, please also do the same thing. Don't wait for me to finish up. So, and inside here also, you have this. So now, they will look like links. Let me go to my portfolio. You can see they look like links. They can be clicked on, right? All right, so, but because they are inside the link, they are accumulating block element behaviors because they are inside a list, I mean. Because they are inside the list, they are now accumulating block element behavior. If they weren't in a list like this, we would do just like this. Let me just remove this, and you see. You can see, like for the ones I just removed on the LI, they are now in the inline, right? So, but I'm choosing to use this because I want to show you something that we are going to use to remove these things, because you might meet this and in any other part. So let us keep it with the list. So to just show that it's a list of navbar items. So now, let us now move on with our styling. So first of all, when you're styling your web page, you need to come and remove some things. You always need to come and do this and say your margin is 0 and your padding is 0. I'll explain why. So this term means we are applying to every HTML element. This term means every HTML element. We should remove the default margins and paddings, right? Okay, so now you can see they were removed. If we don't have it here, let me comment it and you see. You can see we have some default margins and paddings. Can you see that? So if we do this, it means every default margin and whatever, it is going to be removed. That is why you can see it looks like this. We usually do this to make sure that we are now going to have our own CSS written. So now we can start with our margins applied. If you want to apply a margin, this is how we do it. I'll explain what a margin is. So if you want to apply a margin, we can do this and then put there 30 pixels. You can see now our margin was applied, left, right, top, and bottom. Both 4 directions, we have a margin of 30 pixels. But again, I don't want it to have it on top, and yet it's there. So that is why if you use margin only, it means this is going to be applicable for top, right, bottom, and left. So to make sure that it applies to certain sections you want, you can do this. You can do like 0 pixel, and then this will stand for top. And please, guys, we use the clockwise direction. You know how a clock counts, or the clock hand direction. So I'm using the same thing. We start from top, which is 0, 0 or top. We put that 0 pixel, which means you are going to have 0 on top. You can always, by the way, again, choose to not put their pixels on 0. On 0 only, on other numbers which are not 0, you should. So 0 pixel, and then we are counting clockwise. If we are from top, on clockwise, we are now right. So this other measure or size will be for the right 30 pixel. If you move on, we are now going to go to the bottom. We also want a 30 pixel at the bottom. If we continue, we're now going to the left. And now we also are going to have 30 pixels. So this is top, right, bottom, and left. We are using the clockwise count or directions, right? And you'll now see on top, we don't have any margin, and on left, right, and bottom, we do, which is 30. I hope that one is well understood. So what is a margin? And how are margins different from paddings? So margins are spaces outside the box. So which means this is a space outside the body. How do we know that? Let us now try to look at this. Can you see this? Or maybe if we create something else, maybe that is when you could understand. Okay, let me try to create. I will apply actually margin when we come to the heading, to the H1. That is how you will understand both margin and the padding. But for now, just understand that margin is a space outside something, and padding is space inside that thing, right? So we shall differentiate all of that when we come to the headings. That is where we can obviously see that. So now, after putting there our margins, now we can, if we put their padding like this, there won't be any difference, right? Because both of them apply the same thing, but in different ways. One is inside and the other is outside. So we shall get to that. But right now here, we should use padding, not margins. I'll tell you why. So now, remember we still have our color, this one. So, but let me move it back to Asia. Let us now go straight to the styling of the header. So our header now, we are going to style it with these styles. So, but again, before we move on to the header, we can also change the font family from the body, because the body, this is going to affect everything. So we can change the font family. So font family are fonts. So fonts are the way your letters or your alphabets and numbers will look like. So we have some built-in fonts. You can see there are different fonts. If we choose, let me choose a weird font so that you can obviously see that. Let me use this one. Do you see how it changed? These are called fonts, but let's use a better one. Let us use a better one. Let us use Vendana. I think this one. Yeah, I think this one might look better. So, and now we're going also to have a default font size. Here it's a semicolon, not a comma. So we're going to have a default font size of 14 pixel. This is a default one. Or 12 pixel, like this. So now, let me explain these values of font family. So this one is our font family, Vendana, and the others are called fallbacks. If this one is not available, it will fall back to this. If this one is not, it will fall back to this. And if this one is not, it will now fall back to the default, which is Arial, I think, for most of the browsers. And here we have fallbacks because we are assuming that some styles might fail. But again, if you're sure that your styles might not fail, you can have in one font family, right? So, but just understand that the way they follow each other, that is their fallback order. So the font size actually determines the size of the letters. So it might be large or less. The bigger the number, the bigger the fonts. So by default, we are giving it this. And now let us move on to the header itself. And then we'll just say, we're again going to use header. And we can as well give the header a background color, which is different. We can give it this one, probably, so that you can see how it would look like, right? So now we can now make sure that our styles, our heading items are now inline. How do we do that? Simply, we can either come and target the header and then the UL element inside and then the list inside, right? And then we can now apply in styles. What does this mean? Here we are trying to look for a list element that is inside the UL that is also inside a header. We can also as well do this. We can remove this. But this one means we are targeting all the lists. We are not being specific. But doing this, we are being specific. We are only applying these styles to the list items which are inside the header and inside the unordered list. So now, if we come here, we can change now, we can change the normal behaviors. So who can tell me the style that we usually use to remove these dots? Somebody? And are these dots applied because of list or because of UL? Because we already learned list. So let me ask somebody. Mike Shake Festo. Mike Shake Festo. Mike check, Chris.
Yes, my check.
So the first question is, are these dots applied because of the UL or the LI?
Yes.
It's because of which one among these, the UL or the LI?
Oh, so what understand what you say. You asked me the why, the dot.
Do you see these bullets?
Oh, okay.
These bullets.
That
Are they there
that dot
because the
is
li or the ul?
it's a AI. AI. It's
It's because of li. What if I
it's
change?
no, it's
What
because
if
of
I change it to this?
UR of
They're gone, right? So it means it's because of the UL. Therefore, let us first
you.
style the UL and make sure that these dots are gone. So we can always remove these dots and change their behavior by using a property called list item, I mean list style. So the list style can be either circles, can be decimals, can be disk, and so on. So right now we're going to make them none so that they are gone, right? So you can see they're now gone. So, and then for them to be displayed differently from their default behavior, or the items inside, these list items inside, you know, their block elements, the li, to change their default display behavior, we can use the display flex, whereby we are displaying them flexibly. You can see now it will change their default behavior. So by default, display has a flex direction of row. That is how by default it is. You don't even need to put it there like this. When you write display flex, by default it is this flex direction as row. But you can as well change this property to column. If you change it back to column, it will be the same thing as we had before, right? But you want it to display in a row. But by default, again, if you don't put this there, it will display with the flex direction of row. So you can see now they're on the same line, right? And now let's remove this header background because I just wanted to show you how it would now look like. So, but again, you can still have it there if you want. It depends on your design. So now let us now first make sure that we put some spacing between home, about, me, and skills. Let us put in some space. And we usually put in space using a row gap. Row gap because they are displayed row. So let us put in 30 pixels. If we put in 30 pixels, it is not actually, we are not actually seeing this. I think the property is called gap only. If we put in gap, it should display. So if you actually get more suggestions, which are sometimes wrong or right, but again, CSS also changes its versions. The raw gap used to work also on Flex, but I think it only works on grid display. And we are using Flex. We shall also come back to that, the display grid and display Flex. But for Flex, make sure you use gap. So we are putting in a gap of 30, but this is too big. Let us put in a gap of 20 at least, like this. And now for the UL, let us also put in a padding on top and bottom, which looks like this, which maybe 10 pixels and 20 pixels like this. I will also explain. So we have seen different ways of padding, writing padding. You can write it with 4 digits like this or 2 digits. What the 2 digits mean, this one you have just explained. It's top, right, bottom, and left using the clockwise clock. And the 2 digits means the first one will be top and bottom. The second one will be left and right. Is this clear? All right, I'll give you more resources to read on this, but just understand this is top and bottom, and this is right and left. So I was just trying to put in some padding here, like this. All right, now I'll put 0. I'll put here 0. I don't want any left or right padding. I just only want it on top. Let me put that 20 like this. So now I also want to remove these underlines, the underlines that are on these nav list items. So how can we remove this? I need somebody from you guys. How do we remove this? Or what is causing these underlines? So if you remember when we were studying the anchor link, the anchor or tags or the hyperlinks, these underlines are coming from that element. Therefore, we need to make sure that we also change the styles of anchor links. So to make it perfect, let us change everywhere we have anchor tags. We don't want an underline. So, and what is the property called? I know some of you already know this.
We use a text decoration and we assign it a value of none.
But can you speak up, please?
So yes, we use the property of text decoration and we give it a value of none.
Yes, text decoration, and you give it the value of none. So this is a property for CSS that should be used with anchor tags to remove the underline. So you can see the value, we have dashed, we have dotted, we have double, we have line through. If you put in like line through, you can see it has a line through. So the one we normally have, it's underlined like this. This is the default one that is there. And you can as well have a dashed and so on, but we don't want anything there. That is why you have to do none. The only reason why I didn't specify header, UL, and list, it's because I want this to be applicable to every anchor tag within my web codes or my web page codes, right? So we are removing it everywhere. Everywhere we have anchor tag, we won't be having like underlines. So now you can see now they are starting to be well structured. Can you see this? It actually looks better than before. Now let us go on the sections. Let us make sure we style every section on its own as how you normally do it on your web pages. So now let us start with the hero section. For the hero section, we are not going to do this. We are not going to do like section maybe for only this, but if we just write section like this and we put there maybe a background color of red, it means this is going to be applicable to every section. You see, every section like this. You can see that is why it is all covered. It is all red because it's now being applied to every section. But that is not how we want it. We want every section to have its own things. So now you can see since we have a padding, it's somehow affecting in a way. And this is the padding that is affecting. If we comment this one out, we can get to remove this, right? So now, to make sure that we do not have this one affect our sections, because we want to apply some sections on the colors, then what should we do? How should we apply these styles? How should we have some space around here, even top here? So we can do this by just making sure. Let me first undo. I want these styles to be used. Let me copy it. Let me cut it. So we can make sure that we come to our header and we put there a padding to have this padding there, as you can see. But we make sure that we only have it on the left and right, because we have in our header some top padding and also some bottom padding. So we can make sure we remove this and we have top 0 and left and right 30, as you can see. So now we also want to have some padding or some margin on this one, on these hero sections. So if we come to our sections, we can have it. Are we going to have in a margin or padding? And this is, I think, is the right time to show you now the difference between margin and padding. Are we going to have in padding or margin? If you have in padding, this is how it will look. Can you see? It is applying space inside the container because the container contains a red, right? So padding will only insert some space inside the container itself. But let's see if we change it to margin, you will see what will happen. If you change it to margin, you can see it applied it outside. Can you see that? So it's outside while for the padding, it's inside, right? So we shall use padding because this is the behavior we want. So on every section, we are going to have in some padding of 30 left and right so that we can have it aligned with our navigation bar. So now let me remove this background. After I remove the background, I'm going to make sure that every section is 100 view height. Every section is 100 view height. So I can do this by saying height, and every section should be 100 view h, like this. VH is view height. View height is the view of your screen, right? You can see this hero section has 100%. I mean 100 VH, About Me has 100 VH, Skills has 100 VH, Project has 100 VH, etc. and so on, right? All the sections. So now, this style goes to every section now. It is being applied to every section. What if I want to apply to some styles to one section? So if I want to apply styles to one section, I can choose to use other selectors. Like I can choose to use a selector of class. I can say section 1. And I can only come and copy this and paste it here. But for classes, the selector are not usually used as the way we use for the tags. For classes, we put there a dot like this. A dot signifies that this is a class selector. So you can now see it is only applied to this hero section. Others do not have 100 VH. You see that? Because we used a class selector which only applies to this one. But if we come and copy this and put it also on another section like this, it also applied to the other section, and the left won't be having that effect because they won't be having that class. But this is not our behavior we want. Let us remove it. Let us remove it. And also make sure that we still have section because we want these styles to apply on all the sections. But as well, we can also use other ways which are not classes. We can use some pseudo selections by just saying this section I want it to apply, or this section I want it to be maybe for a certain, maybe it is the first child, second child, and so on. So you can come and look when you put there one single colon, you will look, there are some with two colons, if that is how we call them. I think they're called colons. So these are called pseudo classes. And if you scroll down, you will see so many. And you'll see one of first of type, and there is also first
Oh,
child.
yes.
Because we already specified now that it's first of type. So we don't need to include in something. So if we come back to our browser, we can now see that the styles were applied because we are looking at first of type. And we can also see there are many. So if we say nth of type, now if we say nth of type, this is when we can now specify what to have inside here. So please do not make the same mistake as I did, because when you start, let's say, when you start writing like first of type and press enter, you won't see any brackets around, which means it is already well written. But when you start typing nth of type, nth means now we are going to specify the number. So when we do nth of type, now it will bring in brackets, and the cursor will be even focused in for you to write in something. And it also starts from 1, not 0. So you can either do nth of type or first of type. First of type means you're looking at the first type of section. And nth of type, you need to specify what you're looking for. If it is the second section, if it is the third or fourth. If we do the third, it means this will be applicable to the third one, right? So this is how you can do it. So don't confuse nth of type and first or second of type, right? So, but in most of the cases, we shall be using nth of type rather than first of type, because most cases we will be needing to specify the index. So now, This is how you can do the same thing without using classes. That is why I wanted to show you this. Again, this is not the behavior we want, but again, we can make it the behavior we want. So let us say the first type will have a background of maybe, how should we, I don't want colors that, let's do aqua, and then we also copy this. And the second one, let us give it a pink. This is going to be a second one. The third one, let us give it a color of, let us give it a color of Asia like this. The third one. The fourth one, let us give it a background color of, I don't know, this pisky. So the last one, which is the fifth, I guess, let us give it a color of, you can also specify your own colors by doing this. Maybe FF means white. If we use the color we used yesterday, F6, which is kind of gray, light gray. So we can now see that our sections are given different colors. Can you see this? So now, we can also center our sections vertically and horizontally, right? To make sure the text are appearing in the middle. So we can do this by making sure that all the sections, instead of specifying one section, all the sections, the display is flex. If we do this display as flex, you see that children will display side by side, but that is not the behavior we want. That is why we're going to change the flex direction back to column so that they can appear under each other, right? And now there is another property which is called justify content, if not items, justify content in the center, which is now going to make it be justified in the center like this. Can you see that? And there is also another one called align items. Also, you give it a center so that they are placed to the center horizontally. So let me explain this so that you're not going to be confused. When you have display flex and flex direction as column, these things will be different from when you have display flex with the flex direction of row. They will be interchanged. So let me give you an example. Let me copy the same things down. If you have here row, this one will mean, this one I just selected will mean differently the same way it is meaning here. So when we have a column, the justify content will be now the vertical adjustment. But on flex, it will be the horizontal adjustment. When we have align items on a direction of column, this is going to be the horizontal display. But on the row, it is going to be the vertical display. So please be careful.
Sorry, sir, could you please come again?
Check.
Yes, could you please come again on the differences?
Okay, so let me explain again. So when we have display flex, you can have a flex direction. The flex direction can either be a column or a row. A flex direction of row, let me comment this. A flex direction of row, it will mean that the children of this thing you have applied on the style. For example, it is this section. The children are these. We are trying to align them or to display them. When you have flex direction as row, they will be displayed side by side. As you can see here, they are displayed side by side, right? And now here, these justify content and align items shall mean this. Justify content will mean you're now displaying or justifying your content horizontally. Let me put here a start and you see. It is just that we have some. Let me try to reduce some words and you see this. Do you see? It is at the start. I've just reduced some words so that you can see. It is at the start. When I do center, it is now in the center. When I do end, it is now at the end. Can you see this? So it is our justify content. It's now working on a horizontal way, right? And our line items now will be working on a vertical direction. If we do start, it will be on top here. If we do center, it will be in the center like this. If we do end, it will be at the end. But please, this is not what is going to be the same behavior when you have a flex direction of column. These ones are going to mean the opposite way. If this one on the row was meaning we are adjusting horizontally, now it is going to mean we are adjusting vertically because we are using column. And this one will be now meaning we are adjusting horizontally, right? Try to play with it and you will see. If you have a flex direction of column, these ones will be differently. Like right now, before we were using justify content for the horizontal, but right now it's no longer the case. Right now it is now vertical. You can see start, center, you can now see. But before when we had row, it was horizontal. Justify content was horizontal, right? That is what I was explaining before. Try to play around with it and see. Let me comment something here below so that you will understand it well. So this one will now, so let me do this. Adjusting. Let me bring it back here. So adjusting the horizon. So because it's now flex column, let me do children will be in block. In block, it means one after the other on different lines. But here, we can't insert the comment into another comment. Okay, let me just do like this. You will know that this is a comment, right? Comment, but this is not the syntax of comments, by the way. I'm just doing it because for you to show you the differences. Children will be inline, right? So, and now when we come to this third one, children will be, here I will say adjusting. This is going to be adjusting now vertically. Whereas the other one, try to see the difference. Whereas the other one will be adjusting horizontally. You see the difference I was saying? It's the same thing, but this one will be now focusing on the horizontal, whereas here it will be focusing on vertical because we have column and here we have row. The same applies to here. This one will be adjusting vertically, whereas here it will be adjusting horizontally. That is where I was putting emphasis. So these ones mean differently as long as we have different flex directions, right? All right. So now we have centered our sections, right? So the next thing is for us to, when we click here, we should move to the about section. When we click here, we should also move to this and so on. But first, let us make sure that we have fixed our navigation bar. How do we fix our navigation bar? I need somebody to tell me how we are going to fix our navigation bar. You already know these properties. Anyone, please? Guys, you should participate. How do we fix our navigation bar, please? Any suggestions, please? Any suggestions? It doesn't need to be correct. Just any suggestions. You can open your mic and speak. I just want to hear from what you think.
Mic check.
Check, check.
What is the kind of fix is for designing?
So
Oh,
fixing it, it means when we scroll, we don't want to see this section also scroll. This one.
okay.
It has to be
Okay. So I guess that we in the path of the anchor tag in
it is
the
in the part
attributes
of
of
this header. We
yeah,
have
we
to
put
fix this header, right? So what is it we are going to use? We already have a header here. So what is the property going to be called?
Mike,
Check, check.
yeah, we can use a property of position and then we assign a value of
We can't hear you. You're speaking from far.
so you can use the of position so that we assign a value.
Can you get close to your mic? Because we can't hear you.
Mic check.
Yes, we can now hear you clearly.
Okay. I think maybe we can use the property of position and then you assign a value of fixed to it so that it stays fixed.
Position,
And
perfect. And we assign a value of fixed. So let's see what will happen. Can you see that? It is now fixed. Even though you can also add in some other things, you might add also top, bottom, and so on. But we just want a basic way to make sure that this is fixed. So, and now to make sure that it is fixed and not being affected by, can you see? It is transparent in a way. Let us make sure it is fixed, but as well have a background of maybe, let's give it the background color of white, right? If we give it a background color, it is fixed, but again, you can see it is somewhat cut off. So to make sure that it contains or it occupies the whole thing, we need to make sure that our left is 0 and our right is 0. So this means we won't have any space here or any space there. So now it will make sure that our navbar is well fixed, right? So whenever you're using position, whenever you're using position, you should always also adjust these left, right, top, and bottom. So if we like put here a top and maybe say top is 100 pixel, look at what will happen. It will move it down because we have put there a top of some size of 100 pixel, right? So, but by default, if it is not there, it is 0. We leave it as 0, it's okay, right? Like this. So now, after fixing our navbar, let us make sure that if we click on About Us, it will move to About Us. If we click on Skills, it will move on Skills and so on, right? So this is very, very simple, and it is not done by CSS, but rather HTML. That is why we had the idea of using anchor tag, because anchor tags can either link an external URL or an internal URL, which might be an HTML page, or it can also link sections. That is how single page applications or single page application webs are done. So we are going to link it, this anchor tag. If we click on home, it should be linked to a section called home. So our home section is the hero section, right? So we'll use IDs. IDs are the ones we use to link in anchor tags. So we come here and give it an ID of home. We'll give this an ID of about me. Sections, we are giving sections IDs. We are giving this an ID. It's the identifier skills. And we are giving this section an ID of projects And we are also giving this section an ID of contact me. For the footer, we don't need to navigate to the footer. The footer, you just leave it alone. The same as we are not giving headers, we are not giving IDs to the header for referencing. Now we'll come to these anchor tags. For the home, we make sure that we link it to the home. We link it to the home like this, but again, we are missing one important thing. We can't just do it like this because it won't know that it's an ID we are linking to it. To make sure that we are linking it to an ID, we need to put there a hashtag like this, because IDs are represented by hashtags. Even in CSS, when we are trying to do CSS of an ID, we put a hashtag on a selector like this, hashtag ID name. For a class, we do class name like this, right? For IDs, it's a hashtag. For classes, it's a dot. So let us go back to our HTML. So we do home, do the same because it's the same format. This is going to be about me, but please make sure the names are the same as the IDs, right? This is going to be skills. This is going to be projects. And this is going to be contact me like this. We have already linked every section. If we come back to our browser now, we should be able to navigate there. If I click on home, I'll stay on the home because it's the hero section, and you can see something changed here. If I click on about me, it will go on about me. If I click on the skills, it will go on the skills. If I click on the projects, it will go on the projects. If I click on the contact me, it will go on contact me. But again, I think it was linked wrongly, right? The idea of contact me was linked outside. That is why it didn't work, right? So if we press again, it will go on contact me. If we come back here on home, we shall navigate the hero section. But you can see it is being so quick. It is not as smooth as we wanted. It is not as smooth as we wanted. So how do we put there some smooth in the way we are navigating to the sections? This is a CSS character. How do we put in some smoothness? It is a it's a CSS property. I need somebody to tell me how we are to do that.
Mic check.
Check, check.
Could use the scroll behavior and assign it a value of 1.
Perfect, perfect. You put it in HTML like this, and you put the scroll behavior smooth. Let us see. It is working. So when we apply a scroll behavior smooth with a value of smooth on our HTML, now we are going to have our smooth behavior. Can you see this? It is now scrolling down or up smoothly. So this is actually going to be the same thing for people who are going to do single page applications, right? Like this. All right. Also, please see how you can use the same scroll behavior by using the body. You can go on and do some research on that one. It should both be fine. But again, it's also okay to have it in the HTML. As we said before we started, you can also have these codes in the HTML rather than the star, which means every HTML element. But this is the best practice. All right. So, and also try to do the same thing and try to minimize the codes as minimum as possible. There is some ways we can actually minimize also these codes, even though this is minimum, because we actually managed to use the nth of type. If you do not use the nth of type, some CSS would be a lot. But again, try to minimize all of this. By trying to minimize, you can optimize these codes. You can see there are some repetitions, like these paddings are repeated. I can remove these paddings like this and bring them to the normal section right here. It means I'll have to delete the others everywhere, right? I'm optimizing. This is what we call optimization, because they were actually the same even here. we shall still have the same thing, right? We shall still have the same thing, we shall still have the same functionalities and so on. But at least now we have optimized them from lines around 80 something to this to 70. That is what we call optimization. So I hope you learned a lot of things here, even though this was the first time some of you guys saw CSS or tried to use CSS. But again, please try to read through CSS. I would recommend